The following is a presentation of the Belly Up Sports Media Network.
Rieger getting traded to Minnesota changes nothing.
6'4" guys running 4.4s. These guys don't grow on trees. And a lot of times I'm willing to bet on, especially long term, on the freak athlete.
You don't ever want to overreact to what guys look like in preseason. There's been a ton of preseason all-stars that never make rosters or never pan out. Good morning, Belly Up Fantasy Live. How's everybody doing this morning? I am Chase Thornton, coming to you as always from the Mott and Bailey Basement Bar. Flying solo this morning. Just got back from vacation with the family. Had off last week. Sorry if we missed everybody. I know I missed everybody, but it was good to have some time away, kind of take some time after the Super Bowl, breathe, relax, get back into, now we'll get back into the swing of things here. Yeah, I don't know if you can see, probably not. I've got a real fun forehead pattern here where you can see exactly where I hit with the sunscreen and where I didn't. We were in Florida, and me living up here in northwest Wisconsin, it was quite the culture shock. We came back home to negative temperatures and a foot of snow since we left, and yeah, I'm glad to just be back into the routine and get back into the swing of things. But how are we all doing this morning? Glad to have you with me. A little bit tired this morning, but we got the 3 food groups. I got some caffeine. We've got the water. And, of course, it wouldn't be the Mott and Bailey Basement Bar and Belly Up Fantasy Live without having a little bit of libation here. So let's get it started. Talking quarterbacks this morning. Specifically, we're going to look at it from a dynasty perspective, but a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about obviously can go either way, can kind of go both directions. It applies to the redraft format and to dynasty as well. But we want to look at where we're sitting here, as we approach the draft. Of course, the combine going on this weekend, so there's a lot of talk about the new prospects coming up, and in dynasty, we're always looking for the new young guys to pick up. But take a look. It seems like every year is the biggest year ever for everything, right? We're always, oh man, it's such a crazy coaching carousel this year. I can't believe how many coaches are, hired and fired, and it's crazy. And so many quarterback questions this year. And every year is the biggest year ever. It's recency bias. We're all prone to it, myself included. I'm not immune to any of that myself. But when we look at it, there really are a lot of questions next year at the quarterback position, the most important position in professional sports. I'm not the only one that makes that argument. I don't think we're being, football centric when we say that. Quarterback literally touches the ball on every single play. They are more often than not the face of a franchise. It's such an important position. You have to get it right if you want to compete in today's NFL. And you have to get it right if you want to compete in fantasy football, especially in the dynasty format. There's a lot of, obviously there's all kinds of different formats, but a lot of dynasty formats are 2 quarterback or super flex type leagues where you need to have that position locked down and nailed down if you want to have any hope of competing. And in dynasty, when you're keeping players, obviously for extended periods of time, and at a position like quarterback where guys typically tend to play longer than other positions, they don't have the 2-3 year shelf life that running backs seem to have. Obviously we just saw Tom Brady play into his late 40s before he retired. Aaron Rodgers is 39 right now. You can play for a longer period of time as a quarterback if you're good in this league. If you can get the quarterback position right in dynasty, you can kind of almost set it and forget it and concentrate on the rest of your roster. But by my count, there are at least 14 teams. It's only a 32 team league, folks. There are at least 14 teams that have quarterback questions entering next season. And, that means that you have quarterback questions coming into next season. Who's going to be playing where? Who's going to be in the best positions to succeed? It doesn't matter if a team's got all kinds of weapons. We saw that last year. all over the place. But Green Bay, my Packers, you see it. If you don't have the right weapons in place, or if you do have the weapons in place in other areas, like say Indianapolis has some nice weapons. If you don't have the quarterback in place and you don't have that shored up, you've got no shot. So when we look at the quarterback position in Dynasty, you want to have a roster building strategy here. Okay. Now let's look at it here. Again, all kinds of formats, but I'm going to assume most leagues, 12 teams is a pretty standard size for a fantasy football league. Doesn't matter, dynasty, redraft, anything. So in the leagues that I play in, the dynasty leagues that I'm in season, we have 30 roster spots. Okay. Now in my league, we start quarterback and a super flex. So it's basically a 2 quarterback league. And then you can start anywhere. You could start anywhere from 2 to 6 running backs, 2 to 6 wide receivers, and 2 to, I think it's 2 to 5 tight ends, or 1 to 5 tight ends. So we don't have to worry about kickers, don't have to worry about defense, don't have to worry about individual defensive players, anything like that. But you have to determine how much of your roster do you want to allot to each of these positions. And when I look at the importance of quarterback in a 2 quarterback league, because of the super flex format, you want to be sure that you have a good stable there. Okay. Ideally, you want not just your starter and your starters, plural, because of the super flex format, but you want to have some young guys that have maybe promise. Maybe they're recent draft picks, the Malik Willis types from last season, or Sam Howells, who as of right now is the quote quarterback 1, QB1 in Washington. You want to have a good mix of the young guys who maybe aren't starting yet, but have potential down the road. I was trying to roster Kyle Trask, for instance, last year, knowing that Tom Brady, even being Tom Brady, wasn't going to play forever, and figuring that they wouldn't want to necessarily as long as they're restarting in Tampa Bay, why hand the keys over to Blaine Gabbert? We all know what Blaine Gabbert is as a NFL quarterback right now. They don't necessarily know what Kyle Trask is. So I figure, okay, well, it's worth a shot. They may draft somebody. They may sign another guy who we don't know yet. They're one of the 14 teams that has questions at the quarterback position. But it's worth the roster spot to take that chance that somebody like Kyle Trask, who's young, he's only 24. Yeah. He's only 24 years old. He's young. He hasn't been in the league long. We don't really know what we have in him yet, but it's worth having some roster spots devoted to some of those kind of guys. And then it's also worth it to have some backups, some backup quarterbacks, some QB2s on your team, especially for those guys, who we know tend to miss time or we think are prone to it. For instance, I had Colt McCoy rostered. I think I have 7 dynasty teams. I think I had Colt McCoy rostered in 3 of them on the off chance that Kyler Murray was going to get hurt. I had Cooper Rush in several leagues, and that turned out great during the time that Dak Prescott missed, because Cooper Rush played, I think, over everybody's expectations, including maybe everybody's but himself and his mom. But you want to look at your roster construction at that quarterback position. Now, for 30 slots in season, we have 40 slots out of season. So one of the things I like to do out of season is I like to start rostering, though, and picking up those guys, those second QB2s and that kind of thing. If nothing else, you can use them as a throw-in on a trade, and it might be enough to tip it in your favor. Oh, I have your guy's backup. You don't have many quarterbacks. If your guy goes down, you're limited to 1 quarterback, or you're choosing between Zach Wilson and whoever else, Drew Lock. But I have your backup, so if I throw in your backup, does that help things any? Does that sweeten the pot? Or can I get a 1 slot better draft pick from you if I do that? It gives you just more ammunition in the offseason. We have 40 slots in the offseason. You've got expanded rosters. I like to use that because quarterback is so important. Now, if you're in a single quarterback format, it takes a little bit of that away in terms of strategy. But there is still something to be said for rostering multiple guys at that position because, again, we talked about it. If you're in a 12 team, I'm in a couple of 16 team dynasty leagues. Well, in Superflex format, in 2-quarterback format, everybody wants to be starting 2 quarterbacks. There's only 32 teams in the league, folks. So if everybody is starting 2 quarterbacks out of a 32 team league, there's only 32 starters to go around. There's only enough for 2 starters per team. If you can be that guy or girl who has the starting quarterback for more than 2 teams, you have taken away someone's ability to start consistently 2 quarterbacks. And so you've taken away, from a roster construction standpoint, at least, you've given yourself a bit of an edge over at least one of the other teams in the league. And obviously that compounds itself the more guys that you have rostered who end up being starters. Sometimes it makes for interesting choices on your end. Those are first world problems, friends. I'm not one of those who's, if I don't have to spend the capital to get, if I could figure out a way to get more starters and more starter quality players on my roster, I want it. I'm not one of those. It's like, oh, well, I would rather have 2 superstar starters and then a bunch of just guys roster filler behind them. And we'll see, that way I don't have to make the decision every week. Listen, choosing between starting Derrick Henry or Aaron Jones, or Saquon Barkley, picking 2 out of 3 of those guys, that's a first world problem. I will take that problem. I will gladly, and you're going to choose wrong sometimes, but I would take that problem over having a really thin, shallow roster where if one guy gets hurt, the whole thing collapses. And at quarterback, that's especially true and especially important in these kinds of formats. If you can have more starters rostered, you take away other people's abilities to field a consistently competitive team. There's going to be weeks, where, your quarterback, plural, don't score as much as somebody else's, 3rd, 4th string wide receiver. That's football. It happens. But from a roster construction standpoint, you give yourself a better shot out the gate if you can roster more than the allotted number of starters. I like to have at least 3, if in a 2-quarterback league, I like to have at least 3 viable starting quarterbacks. And they don't all have to be Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, and Justin Fields. You don't have to just have that level. But if you can have 2 of those guys, and then again, a Ryan Tannehill, there you go. You've taken away someone else's option for a starting quarterback there. Heck, I had picked up just on a whim last season that, in a preseason, we weren't necessarily sure who was going to start for the New Orleans Saints last year. And when it looked like it was going to be Jameis Winston, I was grabbing Andy Dalton for free off of waivers. And then the whole thing flipped and Dalton ends up being the starter. And so I've taken away someone's option. I've also given myself another option for bye weeks. Now I've got enough starting quarterbacks that I don't have to do the 1 week punt on the position and try and fill in with let's hope this running back goes off this week, because I can plug another starting quarterback into that second quarterback slot. One of the other things I like to do, and this happens. This is good dynasty strategy across the board, regardless of whether it's quarterback position or not. But you always have to be honest with yourself about your roster. Can I compete? Am I realistically competing this year? And if you're not, it's time to start making some choices about how to rebuild that roster. One of the ways to do that is to trade older veterans away to teams that do think, whether they are or not, but teams that do think they're contenders, and recoup either player assets from them that they don't feel they need or that they don't need, or draft picks for the future. So trade your veterans away if you could trade last season, if you could have traded away Tom Brady, you didn't need him. He was your 3rd quarterback in the scenarios that we've been talking about, or you were out of it. If you could have traded away Tom Brady for a draft pick for this season, or for a younger running back that Nobody knows whether they're going to start or not, but at least you've got that option for the future now. If you could have pulled that off, you'd feel pretty good about yourself. Early in the season, if you could have, I mean, nobody was really all that hyped on, like, say, Tyler Algier early in the season last year. If you could have pulled off something like that, you have set yourself up better for the future, because obviously now Tom Brady was a 1-year rental for whoever got him last season. And you came out ahead because you've got a younger guy that you're going to be able to have on your roster, and you didn't have to necessarily give up anything that hurt you to do it. So just a little bit of roster strategy for you there. So let's get into the players. Let's look at this. There are, let's say, there's probably 10 teams. There's probably about a third of the league that has not only an established quarterback as a starter, but it's kind of a younger guy who we can reasonably assume, barring injury, and of course those happen. We can't foresee that. Somebody could step off the curb wrong tomorrow and blow their ACL for the season. Not to be morbid, but it happens. There's about a third of the league that has their quarterback position not only nailed down in terms of who their starter is going to be, but has a reasonable expectation this is going to be the guy for a while. Okay, the way I see it, guys in this category, you're talking about Josh Allen in Buffalo. Obviously, Josh Allen's 26 years old, one of the premier quarterbacks in the league, scores a ton of points for you. He's going to be around a while. Guys like Joe Burrow for the Bengals, Trevor Lawrence in Jacksonville. Trevor Lawrence is 23 years old. He's younger than half the top quarterback prospects in the draft this season. And the way he looked last season, holy cow, dude. Trevor Lawrence, I've got him on one of my dynasty rosters, and I'm thrilled about that. Patrick Mahomes, obviously the MVP. Justin Herbert, Jalen Hurts in Philadelphia. Then we get to some of the lesser guys that were not necessarily, they're not necessarily league winner types right now, but again, younger guys who we have a reasonable expectation of starting on these teams for a long time. Guys like Kenny Pickett in Pittsburgh, 24 years old. He's the starter there. Beat out Mitch Trubisky, which you can argue whether that's a feat or not. Mac Jones in New England had a little bit of scare last season with Bailey Zappi, another guy that who we'll maybe talk about today, but had a little bit of a scare when Bailey Zappi came in for him when he was hurt and played pretty well, actually. But Mac Jones, only 24. He'll be there a while. Tua Tagovailoa, 25 years old. Now, Tua, obviously, there's the questions around his health and his concussion propensity, and is he going to, are we going to lose him in terms of, from a roster availability standpoint, in terms of seeing him play in the league? Is he going to be able to do it with what we've seen from him concussion-wise? Right now, I think that the reasonable assumption right now is to hope last season was a fluke and move forward. But he has shown a propensity for concussions, and we know that with the direction the league is headed right now, and where they should be trying to protect guys' health, it's a real question with Tua going forward. But again, 25 years old, he's the starter on that team. Now they do have a nice young backup option, Skylar Thompson, who did not look like the game was too big for him. I thought last year wasn't a superstar by any means, but Tua's on this list of younger guys who's an established starter. And I'm going to add, and some people might laugh about this. I don't know. Fine, laugh. Good. Gets you talking. Deshaun Watson, with the money they have invested in him in Cleveland and what they have given up to get him, the assets that they have poured into that position, and we all know the history of the quarterback position in Cleveland. We've all seen the jersey with 387 names on it. With what they've got invested in him, he's going to be their starting quarterback, folks. He is. Now, I know he didn't look great at the end of last season, but how many of us would have looked great coming into that season, having not played in essentially at full NFL game speed in 2 years? What did we really think was going to happen? He played a little bit in the preseason, and we know what preseason is. I mean, Deshaun Watson, even if Deshaun Watson sits out the next 4 years, he could probably still step on a football field and outrun some car salesmen and, insurance brokers and stuff. What did we think was going to happen with Deshaun Watson last year? he was going to come in and from day one was going to look like MVP candidate from 4 years ago. Everybody needed to temper their expectations for what Deshaun Watson was going to look like last season. Now, this season, the distractions, whatever you want to call them, we've addressed his situation on this show before. But the distractions ostensibly are behind him now and have been behind him. He has not only, played, gotten himself back up to, we assume, game speed, game readiness. He's had a full off season without those distractions, to be with the team, to be working with the team, to be the quarterback. Deshaun Watson's only 27 years old. He's the oldest guy on the list that I just ran through here. But Deshaun Watson is literally, look it up, Deshaun Watson is 3 days older than Patrick Mahomes. 3 days older than Patrick Mahomes. And I know we're talking about the NFL MVP. We're talking about maybe the best player in the league right now in Patrick Mahomes. But there's this assumption that we all have when we think about talk about Patrick Mahomes, that Patrick Mahomes is going to be around when he's got 15 years left to be this superstar quarterback. And he's going to be this, transcendental figure in the game for so long. Speaking of Tom Brady, we all got skewed by Tom Brady's career. And we're lucky, whether you're a fan of his or not, we're lucky to have been able to witness Tom Brady's career as football fans, as fantasy football fans too, specifically. I don't think something like that happens again. It's just, it's a different league now than when he came in. Tom Brady's a special player, special person, took care of himself in ways that we've never seen guys take care of. Avocado ice cream. Come on. But we've all been skewed by his success and his longevity. Not everybody plays up into their 40s. Aaron Rodgers is an old man. Even at the quarterback position, Aaron Rodgers is an old man from a football standpoint. 39 years old. He's a young buck compared to yours truly. But guys just don't play into their 40s unless they're kickers in this league. Think about it. So we all think, Patrick Mahomes got 10, 15 years left. Patrick Mahomes is 27 years old. But so is Deshaun Watson. And he's 3 years removed, 3-4 years removed from being an MVP candidate himself. Yes, we haven't seen much out of him in the last 2 years. Yes, he didn't look great at the end of last season, but he's still young. We know the quarterback he has been, and it's not like they don't have weapons in Cleveland. They've got a good offensive line. They've got a good running game. Whether or not Kareem Hunt sticks around, they've got a good running game. They've got some good young guys behind him. They've got some receiving weapons, and they've got an entire offseason here now to add to it. Deshaun Watson's going to be there. He's going to be their starting quarterback. So I like him on this list. If you've got one of these 10 guys, at least one of these 10 guys on your dynasty roster going forward, you've given yourself a good foundation because you've got a young player who you can reasonably expect to have for at least the next 3-4 years. And those are the windows we kind of talk about in dynasty. Some dynasty leagues don't even last that long. So if you're looking at a 3-4 year window and getting yourself set up and having yourself set up for it, you're sitting good. If you've got one of these guys at least on your roster, you've given yourself a good foundation because these guys are going to be there for the long haul, and you've got a starting quarterback who's young and kind of the unquestioned guy there. Then we've got 4 or 5 other guys who are established starters, but they're older. And how much longer are they going to be either in the league or with the same team that they're on? And these are guys like, I'm talking Dak Prescott in Dallas, Russell Wilson, obviously Russell Wilson, Kirk Cousins in Minnesota at 34 years old, Jared Goff in Detroit. Now, Goff played really well last year. I think he has worked out better than the Lions ever could have hoped for, or Lions fans, I should say. I think the team figured what they were getting in him. There's a reason they took him back in the Matthew Stafford trade. And he's only 28 years old. It's not like he's a ton older than these other guys, but he's approaching 30. He's 28 years old right now. And there's been some question. Okay, are they going to, is Jared Goff really the long-term answer, or is he more of a bridge quarterback? I like him as more of a longer-term answer in Detroit because I think he runs the offense well. That's another team that's got a ton of weapons. And Jared Goff isn't necessarily the kind of quarterback that makes his weapons better. But Detroit's got the kind of team where the weapons might make Jared Goff better. And if he'll work out and you don't have to worry about that position, take it. These are guys, again, if you got a guy on this list, Russell Wilson, I know he was terrible last year. I know last year was a cluster, and a half with Russell Wilson last season. But the thing about Russell Wilson, again, like I just said with Deshaun Watson, they have stuck a ton of capital into Russell Wilson. They are going to start him. He's going to be the guy. Unless he pulls some kind of surprise Andrew Luck retirement here in the next several months or even the next year or two, Russell Wilson's going to be the guy. So again, you've got a guy that's established that you can count on, that you think that you're going to have on your roster for a while. Then we get to a portion of the league where we've got some veterans where the clock is ticking. I don't think there'll be a name on this list that surprises you. Well, maybe one. And I'm talking about guys like Aaron Rodgers, Matt Ryan, Matthew Stafford, Ryan Tannehill, guys who are in their mid to late 30s. We're not sure how much longer they're going to be in the league. Some of them, we're not sure how much longer they're going to be on the same team. Rodgers, we don't know where he's going to necessarily be. He's out of the darkness, but he hasn't shown any light on the subject as to whether he's going to play this year and whether that'll happen in Green Bay. Geno Smith, even I have on this list. Geno Smith's only 32. He's not as old as some of these other guys, but we thought he was out of the league at this point last year. We thought he was on his way out or was at least destined for career backup land. Now it looks like he's subject of possible extension, talks and everything else. But those are guys where, that they're going to play this year and they're going to be on teams this year, but we don't know how much longer for the future. So if you're counting on these guys in Dynasty, you want to be making sure that you're backing up and having a plan for how to go forward at that position, because these are guys who you may not have for much longer because of their age and their playing career. Or if you find yourself in that position we talked about earlier where you're not necessarily competing, you might be able to offload these guys for some younger assets. But these are guys where if they're your primary guy on your Dynasty roster, you're going to want to look for some alternatives and you're going to want to set yourself up sooner rather than later. Then we've got a whole slew of young quarterbacks where we have questions around what's going to happen with them next season and going forward. Okay. And this doesn't mean these guys aren't starters. Doesn't mean they're not stars. Doesn't mean that I don't want. It just means that we have questions about it for one reason or another. Where they're going to play, if they're going to play, their future with their current squad, all those kinds of questions that come into play. That list of guys. I'm talking like Kyler Murray in Arizona. He's only 25. He's a young guy. We know he can score some fantasy points, but they've just had a regime change down there. Kyler Murray he's had some injury problems. There have been public questions about his dedication, founded or unfounded. I don't know how much stock I put into those kinds of talks, but there are questions surrounding Kyler Murray as the starting quarterback of the Cardinals moving forward. Coming off, we don't know if he's going to be ready to start the season. So, again, a young guy with questions. Desmond Ridder in Atlanta. They released Marcus Mariota. Desmond Ridder looks like he's going to get the shot to be the guy. Draft pick from last season. Did not look necessarily NFL ready. Was not ready for prime time last season. 23 years old, though. This is a guy that you want on a Dynasty roster. It's the kind of guy you want on a Dynasty roster. But there are questions surrounding him and his long-term viability. The situation in Baltimore with Lamar Jackson, I think we all rightfully assume that Lamar Jackson will be back and will be the starting quarterback for the Baltimore Ravens this season. But how much longer will he be? Or there have been trade rumors, and will they sign him? Will they, Will they let him go? He is his own agent. He doesn't have an agent. He does his own negotiating. How does that play into things? And even behind him, Tyler Huntley. Tyler Huntley is only 25 years old. He's only a year younger than Lamar Jackson. Tyler Huntley has played well when he's had his opportunities, when Lamar's been hurt or been out. So both of those guys, younger guys in Baltimore, that we have questions about their situation. If Lamar Jackson is the starting quarterback for the Baltimore Ravens, Lamar Jackson is a starting and possible star, not just regular player, but fantasy player as well. But again, questions about his availability, questions about his status going forward as the starting quarterback for the Baltimore Ravens. Matt Corral in Carolina, unfortunately, got injured last season. Carolina is ripe for a guy to step in, take control of that situation, and run with it. They need a starting quarterback. They've got about 38 quarterbacks on the roster that no one else in the league wants, which means they don't have a quarterback. Because, the old adage, if you've got two quarterbacks, you don't have a quarterback. Well, they've got, like I said, an entire, Rolodex full of them that nobody else wants. That position is ripe in Carolina for someone to take charge, take that bull by the horns and run with it. Unfortunately, Matt Corral, their draft pick last season, gets hurt in preseason, can't play all season. They don't know what they have in him yet. He's young. He's the kind of guy that I have him on a couple of dynasty rosters myself, but we don't know what we have in him, and they don't know either. They were a team, interestingly, another name on this list, Sam Howell in Washington. I kind of alluded to it earlier. Ron Rivera is calling him the QB1, but he said, but he's not our starter right now. He's just the top of the depth chart right now. What does that mean, Ron? Does that mean you guys are still looking for veteran? They released Carson Wentz. They don't have him around. They still have Taylor Heineke, in the picture. Taylor Heineke, they know, can start for them. He can, receive snaps and hand the ball off, and every once in a while throw it to Terry McLaurin, but I could probably throw the ball out to Terry McLaurin a couple times a game. But Sam Howell's only 22, but Sam Howell's a guy that I thought would have been a perfect draft pick for Carolina. Coming from Carolina, I realize it's two different states, but coming from that area would have been a home run pick, I thought, for them from a PR standpoint, but also from a need standpoint. Well, now Sam Howell's top of the depth chart on a team that needs a quarterback, and the team that should have taken him, in my opinion, doesn't have a quarterback that they view as the answer there. But Sam Howell, again, we know he's QB1. He's young. He's only 22. He's one of the youngest guys that we'll talk about today. But we don't know what we have in him yet. I mean, really, we haven't seen much of him. Justin Fields, again, fantasy-wise, the dude's a star. NFL-wise, team's got the first overall pick. They were not crazy successful. Again, yes, they don't have a ton of weapons there. It doesn't matter who's throwing the ball for them. They didn't have a ton of weapons last year, and some of the one Chase Claypool thing didn't pay immediate dividends last season. Now let's see how it works with a full off season. But and Darnell Mooney was injured. They had a rough go of it last season from an injury standpoint. But there's questions now about him. He's only 23 years old, folks. He's young. Again, younger than half the guys we'll talk about when we talk about prospects. But Justin Fields, there's talk, okay, are they going to trade him and use that number one pick to take one of these other guys? The logic behind that, for those of you like myself who are like, why? Justin Fields looks like he can be the guy. He looks like he can be a leader on that team and has been a leader on that team. It's all about that contender window in the NFL. If the Bears don't feel like they're going to be contenders here for the next 1 or 2 seasons, or if they think they can put together a contender here, say in 2 seasons, by the time they're competitive and really honestly ready to make waves in the NFL, Justin Fields will be off his rookie contract and he's going to be costing you mega bucks at the quarterback position. Whereas if you can do like the Seattle Seahawks, we saw the Seattle Seahawks do this a decade ago with Russell Wilson. We've seen other teams this has been the model. If you can hit on that rookie quarterback in his rookie quarterback contract window, you can use the money you're saving on that position to enhance your roster elsewhere and really boost your chances of competing in this league. If you're paying a quarter of your salary cap, or a fifth of your salary cap, I should say, somewhere around there, if you're paying $40 million a year to your quarterback, which is what it takes at this point, you don't have that money to spend elsewhere. If you're paying a guy on a rookie contract, you're paying less than half of that, a quarter of that. You've got a ton of assets now that you can go out and get and use that money for. So the questions about trading Justin Fields aren't necessarily about whether Justin Fields can be a competitive quarterback for the Chicago Bears. It's more about that competitive window. And do they see themselves, can they see themselves competing with him still in this rookie contract for another 2 years? Again, questions. Jordan Love in Green Bay. Obviously, we've got questions about Aaron Rodgers. That means we've got questions about Jordan Love. We don't know which one of them is going to be a starting quarterback this season or going forward for the Green Bay Packers. We don't know if Jordan Love is even going to be a Packer or Aaron Rodgers. If Rodgers decides to come back and he commits to 2-3 more years and commits and says, I'm not going to pull the Brett Favre, will I, won't I? Do they use Jordan Love as a trade asset? If they ship Rodgers out or Rodgers decides to retire here in the next half hour, we don't necessarily know what we have in Jordan Love yet. So Jordan Love, another guy, worth a good roster spot on Dynasty, but we don't know what's going to happen with him. Davis Mills in Houston didn't play well. Jarrett Stidham in Las Vegas could end up being their starter. They could draft a guy. They could sign somebody else. They let Derek Carr go. The job's wide open. We talked about Skylar Thompson. We talked about Bailey Zappi a little bit. Daniel Jones is a guy that in fantasy we know is a star. Pretty reasonable assumption he's going to be the starting quarterback for the Giants at least this season on a franchise tag, if not sooner. They're looking at extension talks now. Last I saw, the news was they may not necessarily be all that close on contract numbers, but Daniel Jones, the guy in Dynasty, because of his rushing floor, I touted him all season. I will bang the Daniel Jones drum until he's out of the league. Probably he's one of the best rushing quarterbacks in the league, and he took a big step forward from an efficiency standpoint as a passer last season. He's got a good coaching staff around him that's staying intact. I like him but again, questions because we don't know his long-term situation. The Jets, do we want to talk about Mike White and Zach Wilson? Again, Zach Wilson's only 23 years old, folks. We don't want to write him off yet. And I don't think they want to, and they don't want to write him off yet. But we don't know. We don't know with him. Drew Lock in Seattle obviously is their backup right now, but again, younger option, questions around Geno. We talked about Kyle Trask. I've brought up Malik Willis's name. We know Tannehill's not going to be in the league forever. Now, Malik Willis did not look good. Did not look like an NFL-ready quarterback last season. But I don't think they drafted him thinking he was an NFL-ready quarterback. I think they drafted him expecting him to sit behind Ryan Tannehill, learn the position for a couple of years, and then come in. They didn't want Ryan Tannehill to be injured last season and have to push Malik Willis into service, especially with the woeful offensive line play that they had and Derrick Henry having injuries and things like that last season. We don't know what they have in Malik Willis yet. Obviously, then, we want to talk about San Francisco. If both of these guys are healthy, if Trey Lance and Brock Purdy are both healthy, can both be ready to go in a perfect world, that's a great situation to be in from a Kyle Shanahan standpoint. You've got a couple of young players. Trey Lance has got that dynamic athleticism we've seen flashes of. And Brock Purdy led the team to the cusp of the Super Bowl as Mr. Irrelevant. The game is not too big for him. Brock Purdy can start in this league. Brock Purdy is not going to be on the Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes level. But Brock Purdy can be on that mid-tier where if you put the right guys around him, and who has better weapons as a whole than San Francisco, you put the right guys around him, put him in the right situation, Kyle Shanahan as a coach, Brock Purdy can get the job done. He throws 2 touchdowns every game like clockwork. We've talked about that on this show numerous times. So if you've got the ability to choose between Trey Lance and Brock Purdy, that's a great problem to have in San Francisco. On your dynasty roster, we don't know which of them is going to, if either will have the job, get the job. So we've got questions about them. They're both worth a great roster spot. Brock Purdy was literally free last season. Literally free. You could have grabbed him at any time before Jimmy Garoppolo went down with injury. You probably could have had Brock Purdy off the waiver wire without even putting a claim in. And now you've got a guy that possibly could be a starter going forward. Those are the kinds of guys you want from a roster construction standpoint. You want to jump on those guys. Let's take a break right now. Let's listen to our Rex MD spot, or one of our newer sponsors here on the network. We come back on the other side. I want to talk about some guys who are rosterable vets who don't currently have a starting job, but guys that we want to see on rosters that you want on a dynasty roster. And then we'll actually get into the draft prospects, and we'll talk about some more about which of these teams, who really has questions next year for their quarterback position. But first up, like we said, let's hear from the good folks at Rex MD.
Fellas, do you sometimes need a little help in the bedroom? Valentine's Day is just around the corner, and our sponsors at Rex MD are here to help you make this the best night of your life. Erectile dysfunction is a common medical issue that over 30 million men in the U.S. tackle every day. We've all had those nights where we get too nervous and just need a little help. The doctors at Rex MD will evaluate you online, no office visit needed, and ship medication directly to your door before the big day. With Rex MD, they're here to help and provide you with real FDA-approved medications at the best price. Act now to take advantage of their Valentine's Day deal by heading to rexmd.com/bellyup. Our exclusive deal will save you up to 90% off, where you'll pay as low as $2 per dose on generic Viagra instead of $90+ on Viagra. That's rexmd/bellyup for 90% off. Your partner will thank you.
There we go. Your partner will thank you. Make sure you get over there, use that belly up promo code. Get yourself whatever supplies you're needing from Rex MD, the good folks over there. We've talked about guys that we know are in the league and have a reasonable expectation now of starting or playing time. But now we've got a list of guys who, again, from a roster construction standpoint, these are the guys that I was talking about earlier, where these are guys that, especially in the offseason when you've got expanded rosters, these are guys that I want to have on my team, one or two of these guys at least. And some of them, I mean, Derek Carr's on this list. Derek Carr's going to start somewhere this season. We know that. But right now we just don't know where. So this is a list of, we'll call them rosterable vets who currently don't have a starting gig. Okay. But could in the right situation. And a couple of them probably will, regardless of whether the situation's right or not. In no particular order except how the alphabet falls, Jacoby Brissett, we saw it last season, capable guy. He's one of those guys that as an NFL quarterback, again, never going to be a star. Nobody wants him as their starter, but they feel okay starting him if they have to. He's started in the league. It's not too big for him. He's a good backup. He's the perfect kind of backup to have. He's the kind of backup that allows you not to have a ton of drop off if your starter goes down. Obviously, if your starter goes down, you're by definition, you're taking a step back. But Jacoby Brissett is one of those guys that I have more confidence in Jacoby Brissett as a backup quarterback than I do probably about 25 other guys in this league who are backup quarterbacks right now. Derek Carr, obviously, we brought him up earlier, but he's going to start somewhere this season. He's going to start. We just don't know where yet. Obviously, if you can get him on your roster, you might be able to get him for a little bit cheaper right now. Off season, we don't know how usable he's going to be because we don't know his situation yet. If your dynasty league is open right now for transactions, you may be able to talk the Derek Carr owner into giving him to you for a little bit cheaper. And you picked yourself up a starting quarterback because he's going to have a job this season. Will it be in Carolina? Will it be in New York? Will it be in New Orleans? Nobody knows yet. But definitely want him on your roster. Andy Dalton, I talked about him. We don't know what's going to happen in New Orleans yet, but Andy Dalton, again, at this time last year, we didn't think he was going to be a starter. He ended up being the starter most of the season last season. And in a two quarterback format, he's a weapon to have. He's not a great weapon to have. You're bringing a knife to a gunfight, to not coin a phrase, but use one. But again, he's an option there. Sam Darnold in Carolina, Nick Foles, guys who have started at times, haven't looked great. But again, situation falls right. You've got yourself a starter. Foles is getting up there a little bit in age. Sam Darnold is still young enough. We don't know what's going to shake out with him, but it looks like his time as a player who's under consideration for starting jobs in this league, it looks like that time might have passed him by. But doesn't mean that he won't start again, given the right circumstance. He's in Carolina, like we just talked about. Somebody needs to take snaps in Carolina and turn around and hand the ball off to Deontay Foreman or try to throw it out to DJ Moore. Somebody has to do that job in Carolina. Sam Darnold is someone, okay? Again, worth a roster slot at quarterback, especially in a two deep, like I said, a two deep format in Dynasty. Jimmy Garoppolo could be a starter next season, depending on where he goes and depending on how healthy he can get himself. We know he's been a successful starter in this league before. He's only 31. He's not going to be a team's top choice. He's not going to be a long-term choice. But Jimmy Garoppolo, reasonable expectation with 14 teams, with almost half the league having questions about their starting quarterback position, Jimmy Garoppolo could be a guy brought in as that bridge quarterback or as that stopgap type guy where, our guy isn't going to be ready this season. Let's give him some time and let's sign Jimmy G. Talked about Taylor Heineke in Washington. We've seen him start. Marcus Mariota is only 29. Has been a starter, started last season. Dynasty-wise, laugh all you want, but dynasty-wise, he was scoring you points last season when he played. He had a couple of dud games, but we know he's a mercurial player. We know he's not going to be the picture of consistency that you're getting from some of these other guys. But if he's starting and when he starts, Marcus Mariota is a viable fantasy weapon. Baker Mayfield, if you paid attention to Baker Mayfield last season and what he did once he went to Los Angeles, I think Baker Mayfield played himself into being able to continue his career with what he did in Los Angeles. He didn't look great in Carolina, but who the hell did? Who has looked great in Carolina for how long? But Baker Mayfield went to Los Angeles, walked in the door. They tossed him a helmet, stuck him on the field to start right away. And he walked in and took charge and played well and gave them a chance. They were more competitive with Baker Mayfield under center than they were at any other time last season. And he showed again that if he's got the right setup around him, you surround him with the right guys and you have the right coaching structure in place. Again, he's not going to be a star. He's not going to be. He was not the number one. He should not have been the number one overall pick. Josh Allen, I think, has shown that. But that Josh Allen was worthy of being the top overall pick. Josh Allen in Cleveland, with that running game and with the offensive line they have and with the defense that they've had, Cleveland could have been Buffalo. But they took Baker instead of Josh Allen. We digress. Baker Mayfield is a legitimate quarterback in this league. He's not a star, but he's a legitimate quarterback. And if he gets in the right situation, he could be a starter. Is there any reason to think Baker Mayfield couldn't be the star? We know what happened in Carolina. Forget Carolina. Put Baker Mayfield in New Orleans. Baker Mayfield could be a starting quarterback in New Orleans. And they've got some weapons. Colt McCoy, again, somebody you could roster, could be a starter. He's probably going to be should be a starter at the beginning of the year unless they go in a different direction. Because, we don't know if Kyler Murray's going to be ready to play. Gardner Minshew, again, another guy, everybody's favorite backup quarterback, because the backup quarterback is always the favorite guy in town. Gardner Minshew, though, a guy who has the opportunities there if Hurts goes down or if he gets traded, Gardner Minshew is a guy that could find himself in a starting position. Cooper Rush, a good backup to roster. Tyrod Taylor, man, what a snake bit dude. Every time he gets in a situation where it looks like he could be the dude, he gets hurt, goes down, and then somebody else. Happened in Cleveland, happened in Los Angeles, happened in Houston. Just the dude can't seem to catch a break. Or when he does catch a break, it's because he's breaking something and now he's out. But Tyrod Taylor's a guy that, again, as a backup quarterback, if he steps in, he's got ability. Worth a roster spot. Mitch Trubisky has been a starter. He's behind a young guy with some questions for the time being. This is his last. He's got a really easy contract for them to get out from underneath. They don't have to worry about that in Pittsburgh. If they let Mitch Trubisky go, they're not suffering. But Mitch Trubisky, another guy like that. And then a couple of guys who we've seen be starters, we've seen have a lot of success in the league, but we don't know if their time as starters has passed them by or not. I'm talking Carson Wentz and Jameis Winston. Wentz, we just said, got released. I don't know that anybody looks at Carson Wentz and wants him for a long-term answer anymore at quarterback position, but he's been a starter, and Carolina. It'd be a very Carolina move. But there we go. Those are guys that you could have you could designate roster spots and have those guys, especially in expanded roster format right now. Pick some of those guys up. Who knows? We might get word on Derek Carr in the next week, 2 weeks, whatever. 2 months though. And find out where and how Derek Carr is going to be starting. That's a guy you want on your roster right now. And he's a guy that we know can put up some points in fantasy-wise. Same with Jimmy G, like I said. Let's go ahead and listen to our second spot right now real quick, and then we'll move on. We'll move on from here, and we'll look at the draft prospects. We'll talk about where some of these guys might fit in and what their prospects are coming up, especially now that we've got it fresh in our head from the workouts at the Combine the other day. But let's hear from Dan Mater and our good friends at Manscaped.
We have breaking news. Manscaped now sells beard products. That's right. They are once again revolutionizing men's grooming with the brand new Beard Hedger Pro Kit. From a beard trim to a fresh shave, the technology behind the Beard Hedger Pro Kit allows you to shape your signature beard look. Now you can finally use Manscaped products to make your drapes match your carpet by going to manscaped.com and using the promo code BELLYUPFANTASY for 20% off and free shipping. It's time to tame your mane. No one likes a weird beard, so say goodbye to all your stubble and trouble with Manscaped Pro Beard Kit. It all starts with the Beard Hedger. This thing is a juggernaut of fixing faces. First off, this cordless trimmer has a rotary wheel that gives you 20 hair cutting lengths, all with one guard, so no more messy drawers full of extra add-ons. That's right, face grooming doesn't need to be hard. Get 20 different beard lengths in just one guard. Plus, it's waterproof, so you can shave in the shower to avoid all that hair in the sink. The titanium-coated T-blade is tough on hair but smooth on your face, leading to single-stroke efficiency that brings satisfaction one stroke at a time. So make sure you get 20% off and free shipping when you go to manscaped.com by using the promo code BELLYUPFANTASY. Once again, that's 20% off and free shipping when you use the promo code BELLYUPFANTASY at manscaped.com.
Excellent work there, Dan. Thank you for that. Yeah, get over there to manscaped.com. Like we said, now they have beard products. You can trim up top, you can trim down below, you can keep them separate, keep them separated, and and take care of yourself. Look good for whoever you're trying to look good for, and feel good. I'm pretty psyched up. Mine's actually starting to come in enough now where I can start taming that thing with my new Manscaped beard trimmer. So now 14 teams in the league. By my count, just real quick, we'll run down the Cardinals. We've said have questions. Atlanta doesn't know what they have. Baltimore, we're still waiting to see how that shakes out. Carolina, the Bears, the Packers, the Texans. What do they do at the quarterback position? Do they hang with Davis Mills? Davis Mills took a big step back last season. It was not good. Definitely not. It didn't look like the same player that we thought we saw 2 years ago. The Colts are still searching for the answer post Andrew Luck. The Raiders, the Dolphins, we talked about, have questions at the quarterback position with Tua and his long-term viability. At least they have the backup option in Skylar Thompson, who's young. And again, another guy who's free. You could have had Skylar Thompson without even thinking about it. You might have accidentally put him on your roster last season. And you had a guy who looks like he could play in this league. He's worth keeping on a roster. The Jets, we don't know what's going to happen with them. We don't know what's going to happen with the 49ers. Tampa Bay has got to figure out post Tom Brady. The Commanders, we talked about, that's 14 teams that have questions moving into the season at the most important position. I think it's reasonable to assume that Kyler Murray's the starter in Arizona if he's healthy and when he's healthy. Lamar Jackson is probably going back to Baltimore. I think my personal belief is that Aaron Rodgers is going back to Green Bay. Justin Fields is going to be the guy in Chicago, for instance. But, Tua is going to be the guy in Miami if and when he's healthy. But the rest of those teams either don't have a guy in a building right now who we know can be the guy. They have young guys who they probably need to either mature and bring along still, or who they might bring somebody in to mentor and to mentor that guy and for them to play behind. There's questions on all those teams. For some of those teams, they can answer that question here in the draft coming up here in a couple of months, end of April. And we've got the combine going on this week. So prospects are like top of everybody's mind. They're right in front of everybody's face right now. They had quarterback workouts the other night. And we've all heard, the top names. We've all known about Bryce Young and CJ Stroud. We've all heard those names. But, you've got a list of, probably 8 guys who are really the top prospects, or at least the top named prospects coming up here. Obviously, we're talking about Bryce Young and CJ Stroud. They're both up for possibly the number 1 overall pick if someone makes a trade with Chicago, or if Chicago does, like we said, do the almost unthinkable and jettison Justin Fields. Anthony Richardson, Will Levis, Hendon Hooker. And then you get farther down the line, and you've got guys like Tanner McKee from Stanford. You've got Dorian Thompson-Robinson from UCLA, who has apparently been acquitted himself well at the combine here. Stetson Bennett even. Stetson Bennett's a guy, and he's been in the news for some of the wrong reasons here lately with some of his conduct in that. And he's older for a prospect. He's 25 years old. He's not one of the higher ranked prospects, but the guy started for the national champion, Georgia Bulldogs, and has apparently, again, acquitted himself well at the combine. It threw well and has kind of raised his stock. Now, he's not a day 1 prospect. He's not even probably a day 2 prospect. He's more of a Saturday morning pick, and he's probably more of a let's see guy. Stetson Bennett is not going to one of these teams that needs or wants a starting quarterback right away. But might Stetson Bennett be an option, say, in Minnesota, where they're not sure how much longer they've got Kirk Cousins or want to deal with Kirk Cousins? Might he be an option somewhere like Detroit? Might he be an option somewhere like, I wouldn't want to put him in New York with the media circus there. But might he be an option somewhere else, like where they maybe sign Jimmy G for a 1 or 2 year bridge and bring Stetson Bennett along behind him and just see what happens, see what they have. So that's your list of like the top named guys, prospects. One name that has really jumped out and is kind of like the darling of the industry and the talk of the week, Anthony Richardson from Florida. Now, Anthony Richardson is one of the younger guys in this whole process. He's only 21. Great measurables. He's got perfect quarterback size. But if you haven't been paying attention to the combine talk this week, Anthony Richardson has been rocketing up people's draft boards. And he has put himself actually in that conversation for being a top 5, top 10 type overall pick. Set quarterback records in the vertical and the broad jump this week. 40.5-inch vertical, 10 feet 9 inches in the broad jump. That's standing here and hopping over there like a deer. 10 feet 9 inches. Both of those are quarterback records. Oh yeah. Then he turns around and cranks out a 4.43 40. One of the 6 fastest times in the last 20 years at the quarterback position. This dude can move. He's perfect size. He is a hell of an athlete. Oh, and he threw well this weekend. Again, yeah, it's the underwear Olympics. We all know that. But there were questions about, how apparently he's been working on his footwork to try and improve his accuracy. That's been a big question. That's been one of the big questions with him as a prospect, as a quarterback prospect, was his accuracy. I'm going to draw a parallel here, and obviously I'm not necessarily saying that Anthony Richardson is going to be this guy, but do y'all remember that the big question, the one question we all had about Josh Allen coming out of college was his accuracy? And who wasn't a question accuracy-wise? Oh, the guy that went number 1 at your Baker Mayfield. Josh Allen has done nothing but improve his accuracy every single season. And no one questions that anymore. Anthony Richardson has the arm. He has the talent. He has the body. He has all of it. And you can coach a guy on things like footwork. It's hard. It's not easy. But you put Anthony Richardson with the right coaching staff, if they can work on that footwork, work on that accuracy with him, he could be that shining diamond in the not so rough that could lead a team and could really blossom. He's not the best quarterback prospect in this class, or not named the best quarterback prospect in this class, but he's the kind of guy that in 3-4 years might show himself to be the best quarterback in this draft. Apparently he has been knocking it out of the park in interviews, talking with teams and breaking down film and answering the questions that they have. So not only is the guy, athletic and gifted that way, but he apparently has a good quarterback mind, and has been really impressing teams with his interviews this week. And this is an example of that guy who helped himself at the combine. Sometimes the combine doesn't really do a whole lot. Guys don't work out. Bryce Young isn't going to throw and work out, but they measured him. They found out he's almost the exact same size as Kyler Murray. So people are making a lot of lazy comparisons to Kyler Murray. Bryce Young is not Kyler Murray in any way, shape, or form. They're completely different players. They're the same size. Great. That doesn't mean anything. Jamarcus Russell was, same size as Ben Roethlisberger. Who would you have rather had on your team? But Anthony Richardson is a guy who has helped himself at the combine. Bryce Young hasn't necessarily helped himself through a workout. Now, he measured better than I think a lot of people thought he was going to measure. He put a little bulk on his frame. He's over 200 pounds now. He was listed under 200. But hasn't done a whole lot to help himself. But Anthony Richardson has rocketed up draft boards and is the talk of the week right now at the quarterback position. This is a guy that if you can pick him up, and you have to play the hype train, you have to ride the hype train. You might have to take him a little earlier, but if you're in a Superflex Dynasty league, when you get to your rookie drafts after the NFL draft here, it doesn't matter where Anthony Richardson goes. Whether he goes to a team like New Orleans or like Carolina, where he would have a chance to start day one, even if he doesn't go to one of those type of teams, Anthony Richardson is a guy to spend a draft pick on this season in a rookie draft to get on your roster, because he's young. You can have him forever. He's at a position of importance, and he's the kind of guy that could be an awesome lottery ticket in very quickly or in the short term here coming up. Obviously, CJ Stroud has looked like CJ Stroud this week. He's continued to impress. People are happy with him. Will Levis, another guy who's thrown well this week, looked really good in his workouts. Good quarterback size, got the arm. As he says, he thinks he has the best arm in the draft. Hendon Hooker is a guy who's he's one of the older prospects. He's 25 years old. He's not young. coming off an ACL injury here, so we don't know when or how available he'll be right away. But again, a guy that looks like an NFL caliber player there. He'd be a little bit more of a long, a project because you can't have him right away. You don't want to take him and think he's going to be your starter this season, but he's in the mix. Tanner McKee. Tanner McKee played at Stanford. He's a big guy. Played at Stanford, so he plays quarterback and he goes to Stanford University. He's intelligent. It's just, is he mobile enough for today's game? Tanner McKee looks like a quarterback from, looks like a quarterback from the mid 90s. That would have been what we would have looked for, right? He doesn't move around a ton, but he's nice. He's big. He's smart. Might be a little bit more of a project prospect. Dorian Thompson-Robinson out of UCLA, a guy who there have been some questions about accuracy-wise, but apparently, again, has worked out and interviewed well this week. We know he's athletic as all hell, and can play the position that way. So on one of those guys that, 30 roster spots, I'm probably putting five. I'm designating 5 roster slots at quarterback for 30 slots. Again, I want 3 of those guys to be starting guys with starting jobs right now, and preferably younger, preferably running quarterbacks, so that I've got, the firepower. But for those other 2-3 positions that you're designating for that slot, taking a flyer on a guy like Dorian Thompson-Robinson, like say a Hendon Hooker, well worth it. And especially, like I said, Anthony Richardson, you're probably going to have to spend some higher draft capital on to get him on your roster. But these are guys, like I said, anybody that could find himself in Carolina has a chance to be the guy right off the bat. Has a couple of fun weapons to throw to. They're not bereft of talent in Carolina. They probably need a better solution at running back, but that's something that it's running back. It's interchangeable cogs at this point in time. That's just how the league works right now. If they don't find anybody else, Deontay Foreman is not hurting that team. Plus, they still have they've got other guys on that team. Okay, I'd like to see them get a better tight end, but they have options there. They're not bereft of talent offensively. And it's a situation that's ripe for a guy to come in, grab that thing by the horns, and take it. Anthony Richardson goes to a place like that, or if they make a trade up and get themselves a little bit better for like, say, a Bryce Young or a CJ Stroud, there's a starter right there. That would be a good situation. I think it would be a good situation for them. If you want to go to, say, like New Orleans is another one that has opportunity for a young guy, where if a guy can come in and get coached up a little bit, they've got weapons there. The Alvin Kamara situation will work itself out. Whether he's there or not, it'll work itself out. I'm not going to count on Alvin Kamara for this season. I don't want to count on him, period, anyway, going forward anymore. I'm kind of off the Alvin Kamara bandwagon. But New Orleans is an opportunity for one of these young guys. I know Malik Willis just got drafted in Tennessee, but you don't know that Tannehill's going to be around for a ton of time. That's a situation where you could plug a young guy in there, maybe bring him along for a year or two here under Ryan Tannehill, and could really blossom into something there. That could be a great opportunity. Indianapolis is a good opportunity. If they decide to stop Indianapolising, to coin a term there, if they decide to stop trying to band-aid the situation with veterans that no one else wants, if they draft one of these younger guys, especially one of the guys, like we said, the Richardsons and the Strouds and the Youngs that we think could step in day one and take that position, good opportunities for guys. New York Jets, Mike White's contract situation. We don't know if he'll actually even be back there. Zach Wilson, I don't think they want to punt on him yet. I don't think they want to give up on him yet. Joe Flacco is about 987 years old. I don't know that they'll bring him back. So what do the Jets do? Do they try the Colts way of thinking and sign a Jimmy G, sign a Derek Carr, try and trade for Aaron Rodgers, catch lightning in a bottle for 2 years? Or do they want to reset and start from scratch again and take one of these, Anthony Richardson types and start over? But that would be that's a great situation for any quarterback to find himself in New York, with the young talent, the weapons that they have at the receiver position, at the tight end position, at the running back position. They are trying to build their offensive line. That team is a freaking powder keg set to explode if they can get that quarterback position right. That would be a great situation for any of these guys, for any of these top guys to wind up in. And if they do, they're worth the high draft capital. I know Bijan Robinson, running back out of Texas, right now is kind of the industry consensus top rookie pick for Dynasty, because he looks like one of those can't miss prospects. But in a 2-quarterback league, if you find yourself thin at quarterback, or you find yourself relying on too much on Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers to get you through right now, with your top overall pick, if you could trade back a spot or two, somebody really wants Bijan or thinks they're in a position to contend and will give you a ton of capital for it, and you can only drop down a couple slots and still pick up one of these top quarterback prospects, well worth it dynasty-wise. So 12-team league, I just said I would designate about 5 slots probably on my roster for that. You're looking at 60 guys you want to roster 60 guys. I just gave you 63 names. I think we talked about 63 different guys, at least brought up their names in this, in this hour here. Plus, actually more like 65. I gave you 65 names. And you notice we didn't just we didn't just take the 2 deep depth chart and just be like, oh yeah, roster that would have been a lazy way to do it. Oh yeah. Take the starter from every team and the backup from every team, and somebody should have them rostered. Not necessarily. You don't necessarily need the backup for every team, because the backup for every team isn't necessarily somebody you want to roster or count on. Having Case Keenum backing up Josh Allen and having a guy like Case Keenum, who I didn't talk about, on your roster, we know Case Keenum can do it. Yeah, you can roster him, especially if you've got Josh Allen. Why wouldn't you? But we're not just going to go down the 2 deep draft pick or the 2 deep depth chart and throw those names out there. But I just gave you enough guys to roster an entire, league there. There's plenty of options out there for how to construct your roster dynasty wise. Again, you want to have some of those starters. You want to make sure that you have enough to pick from, and you can create position scarcity to some extent if you can play your cards right and roster more than that. So, let's see what shakes out here with the draft in 2 months. Let's see what shakes out here in free agency. We might revisit the quarterback situation or position a little later in this offseason. But there's plenty of questions out there. Should be interesting to see how it all plays out here. That's going to do it for us today. We're going to move on here. We'll be back next Sunday. Should have Kevin back. We might have Andrew back with us again as well next week. We'll look at some more positional and some more dynasty roster construction, questions here, and start really digging into, what moves can we make this offseason that are really going to set us up to have success this season, or set you up if you're in the middle of a rebuild like I am in a couple of my leagues. So get yourself over to bellyupfantasysports.com. Check out all the great content that's going on over there, especially if you're a fantasy baseball guy. We've got fantasy baseball really cranking up, really starting to crank up. We're right in the middle of spring training games. We've been playing spring training games here now for the last week or two. Drafts are happening, are coming up here in fantasy baseball. We've got content over there. Kevin Wilson, my co-host here, Vince Stover from the Sports Stove. Ian Lemersall, new guy on the block there, but he's putting out a ton of baseball stuff too. There's all kinds of fantasy baseball going on over there, even some basketball stuff. Kevin's released a waiver wire article on fantasy basketball over there. So get over there, bellyupfantasysports.com. Check all that out. I myself will have some Dynasty content coming out here. From a football standpoint, I'll have some baseball, some like player profiles and that coming up here. And then as always, check out the Sports Stove. Check out Divots and Pivots, Mr. Mallard's golf show. Check all of that stuff out here on the Belly Up YouTube channel. If you like what you're hearing, if you like what you're seeing from us, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Stay caught up with everything that's coming out from Belly Up Fantasy. And as we say every week, we will hopefully see you next week. Good luck on everything you got going on, and Slan Java. We will see you next week.